Makofi tafadhali, makofi to Alexander. And I'll be keeping time, but please listen in. Karibu, Alexander.
Thank you. I'll read this to move. Thank you very much, Rogers. I will go with the protocols that have already been observed. And Rogers and I go way back, even before the Treasury. We were at the university together. For the younger people, they don't know the university. But maybe Honorable Karoli would know the university. So my work here is very easy. If Dennis annoyed you, I will probably annoy you further by giving you the story of our country and where we are as a country. And my hope is by the end of the preliminary findings that we are going to present here, you will see the urgency that we need to go with, and I'm saying this as I wait for the slide to come up, the urgency with which we need to work on our debt situation. And I will go by the words that Dennis started with, that the debt issue in our country is beyond economics. It is more of a governance issue. And I like what has already been said here by the two honorable members who came before me, because some of the stories that you have pointed out appear very well in the report that we have prepared. The KLN case, for instance, is one of the cases that we have highlighted in the report, where we have instances of debt that was acquired for projects that we cannot see. And this brings out the whole issue of odious debt. And we may not have the total number, a concrete number of odious debt, but examples like the KN case, what we have already, I understand we have already paid for damages to Adani, for instance, after we cancelled those deals, and many others that exist, show the dire need that we have to look at our debt situation as a governance issue. We will also be delving into the issues of domestic debt and where it places us as a governance issue. Because where we are now, when I was on the other side that Rogers has mentioned, we always try to ensure that our domestic, there is a good mix of both domestic and external debt. But now where we are now, we are at a situation where domestic debt has overtaken external debt, and it is growing faster than external debt. The main problem we have with that is the fact that for external debt, and Honorable Karori did mention, it is possible for you to pin where the external debt went, the one that is legal. But for domestic debt, unfortunately, we cannot pin. That is where we have a bigger problem. So allow me to take us through the results of the study that we've been carrying out. TISA has been taking lead on behalf of Okoa Uchumi, and the reason why we decided to carry out this study is Kenya already is in a debt crisis, where more than half of our revenue goes to paying debt. In every 10 shillings that we collect, around 7 shillings goes to debt repayment. This therefore means that we leave very little for our other operations. This is then made worse by the fact that the little that remains, the 3 shillings that we are talking about, is also vulnerable to a lot of corruption and wastage. This therefore led the country out of the push that we had as civil society and also our colleagues from both IMF and World Bank and others to push the country to go into to the World Bank and request for a governance and corruption diagnostic. However, as Okoa Uchumi, we are cognizant of the fact that the report that will come from the IMF, as good as it is may leave out a majority of Kenyans. As you look at this room, many of the Kenyans who suffer out of the debt situation that we have or the mismanagement of our economy will not be in a position to bring their views on the table when the governance and corruption diagnostic report by IMF is being produced. Therefore, as Okoa Uchumi campaign, we decided, let us now prepare a shadow governance and corruption diagnostic from lived realities of Kenyans. How are we feeling it at the ground? And that is why we are here today. Therefore, the report that we are going to present to you tries to go down to the common mwananchi in the streets and asks the question, how does the debt question or the economy, the way it is being managed, how does it affect you? And we have looked at the issue of debt. And in our view, debt is not just numbers in an Excel sheet. These are governance issues that affect our normal day-to-day life. And I will take you through some examples. For instance, when we look at the issue of food, we have approximately, for these people, when you talk about debt, what they know is there are scandals that are riddled within our agricultural sector. They will just tell you about issues like the maize scandal. They will talk about the fertilizer subsidy scandal. All of us in the country are aware of the fake fertilizer that was applied not long ago. The Kenyans down there who are going without food, when they hear issues of economic mismanagement, what they know is their land that has been grabbed for one reason or the other. They do not understand those big numbers in the debt register that Honorable Karori has mentioned. When you talk about debt for our young people, this is a generation that is on the edge. For this particular generation, about 30% of our population, they are unemployed, and the unemployment levels among this group of people is at around 13%. But when you talk to our political class, they do not see this as a problem. They see these young people as votes or as people who can be mobilized for one reason or the other. Of course, I am not blind to the fact that we have a few, like Caleb here and Karori, who see things differently. But all the empowerment projects that we have had that are supposed to create jobs for our young people, starting from the Kazi kwa Vijana, and those of you who remember, it was even said at some point, it was Kazi kwa Vijana, pesa kwa wazee. That particular project was supposed to uplift the young people and give them some decent jobs. However, that did not succeed. It's, I call it a sibling. There's a sibling of the Kazi kwa Vijana that came not long ago, the Kazi Mtaani. Also, we have stories about Kazi Mtaani that are not very pleasing and they didn't provide jobs for the young people. Then we have the issues of NYS. All of us are familiar with what happened with the NYS. It was supposed to be a good program that would give the young people jobs. It would help them build their savings. But what ended up happening was money being carried with sacks. And those scandals, we have not seen people go to jail or being properly prosecuted for the same. That is what the young people are feeling when you talk about jobs and the monies that have been used. And now we have what we are seeing moving around called empowerment programs. When we look at our budgets, we are not seeing where this money is being appropriated. I'm very sure Honorable Karori here will tell you they did not approve or appropriate any money for the empowerment programs that we are seeing moving around. So it tells you there is a line within our budget that is being diverted from where it's supposed to go for us to see the empowerment projects that we are seeing around. Now, Kenyans, and I am a parent of young children in now what year? Is it a competence-based curriculum or competence-based education? We are not even sure. We are feeling, and I'm speaking now as a parent of young ones, we are feeling like we are guinea pigs in an education system that has not been tested and found to work. We are seeing a lot of corruption and misuse of resources where we have ghost schools and ghost students. Imagine, we are paying for ghosts to the tune of around 16.6 billion in capitation in 2024. And we also have other programs, like there was in Gishu, Finland, Canada program that was presided over by one of our leaders who is still in office today. And in that particular program, if you ask the parents who are involved losing their prized properties, but their children did not get what was promised to them. These are the struggles that the ordinary Kenyan is going through that we thought the IMF diagnostic would not look at. I rush now to our health system. Our health system, actually, any one of us here, you are just one disease away from poverty. Just one disease away from poverty. If you ask anybody here who has dealt with cancer, a cancer patient, you sell everything that you have for you to take your loved one to hospital. At the end of the day, you lose that person. You lose the person and you lose all your resources. But this is happening even as we see a lot of corruption in KEMSA and issues like the COVID billionaires. And in our view, we are seeing Kenyans telling us that the health sector in our country has become actually a killing field, where you don't know whether you will survive tomorrow. We were told that we needed to shift from NHIF. And for a system, just a system, we needed to pay 104 billion shillings. When we mention these numbers, at times you don't get the seriousness of a billion. Many of us here, if you came across a billion, I will not have any people to address here, because you'll be very busy trying to find out how do you utilize a billion. But these numbers, we have mentioned them over and over again, up to a point where now we do not realize how serious they are. Kenyans have come to these numbers, we have mentioned them over and over again, up to a point where now we do not realize how serious they are. Kenyans have come to, some of our leaders, they do not see the crisis we are in. They just see an opportunity to make business. And that is why we have issues in health. You have the managed equipment services. That is again a mess. I was reading a report the other day, and you could see in some of our counties, some of the equipments that came through that MESS program are still packed in rooms, but you are still paying somebody for those particular items. These are challenges that our Kenyans are facing, and they want to talk them out. Now, we have what has been touted as one of the best constitutions in the region and across the globe. But what we are seeing is the erosion of the fundamental architecture of our constitution. And lawyers here, better than myself, I am a lawyer to the extent of reading the law, but not having gone to school on that. But we all understand, I am a lawyer to the extent of reading the law, but not having gone to school on that. But we all understand that the architecture of our constitution is the basis of separation of powers, where the legislature comes up with the laws, the executive implements those laws, and the judiciary helps us with mediation and interpretation of the laws. But right now what we are seeing is a situation where the executive has captured the legislature, and to some extent even the judiciary. So the whole aspect of separation of powers is a problem. And this, we see it in the way we are mismanaging the accumulation of debt. If you recall, sometimes back in 2014, before 2014, we had the PFM Act required that all loans have to hit the consolidated fund. But we had a situation where an amendment was pushed through Parliament, where now, from the Eurobond of 2014, it is possible for borrowed money not to hit the consolidated fund. That is where we started going wrong as a country. I will not go beyond this without mentioning the issue of devolution and how we are undermining the aspect of devolution. A good number of members of parliament do not agree with us on this, but nonetheless, this is the situation of our country. When we had CDF that was brought in by Honorable Bukari in 2003, it was a very good idea because it was the only fund that had gone all the way down to the Mwananchi. And we have no problem with money going to Mwananchi at the bottom. But we have to ask ourselves, in our current constitutional architecture, do we need CDF that is currently unconstitutional? And the courts have already pronounced themselves on this. We should ensure that our devolved governments work and we allow members of parliament to do their job. And in our constitution, members of parliament only have 3 responsibilities. It is legislation, representation, and oversight. So it becomes a challenge when we have members of parliament being involved in executive functions through CDF in whatever manner you want to call it. Call them patrons, call them whatever you want to call them, but they're involved in implementation, which has been a fundamental challenge when it comes to CDF. But we are not losing hope because we expect that some of these things will be changed as we implement our constitution. The other challenge we are seeing with our constitution is the practice of selective prosecution. Today, if a small clerk in government collects 2,000 shillings from a Kenyan, the court process against this person will be very swift. And within a short time, that person will be jailed. But look at what is happening with the high and mighty in our country. They will get preferential treatment when it comes to the court processes, and you will see them walking scot-free. This is happening as we see high political consolidation of power within the executive, where right now, Honorable Bukari did tell you, very few of his colleagues would be comfortable coming to such a meeting because they do not know the repercussion that will befall them. But in our view, we have gone back to check where did the rains start beating us. And we went as far back as the 70s. And we came across a report that was written or chaired by Duncan Degwa, who is a former head of public service. And what we are calling the Degwa report was a commission of inquiry report. And this particular report is what brought us to where we are today in our view. Because the report, one of its findings was that we did not have educated people outside the public service who could run our private sector. Therefore, this particular report recommended that the civil servants of the time should be allowed to involve themselves in commercial transactions or commercial businesses. And what happened, if you look at our history now from 1971 coming this way, the elites that were in the public service ended up now controlling our financial systems in our country. If you look at our banking sector, if you look at our insurance sector, if you look at it carefully, you will see names of people who are senior in government from the 70s. They are the ones who are running our banks. They are the ones who are running our insurance sector. And this has a bearing on debt. Because we saw here earlier 6.32 trillion of our debt stock out of our 11.8 trillion is domestic debt. When you look at who owns this debt, you will find that 48% of that 6.32 are banks. Then another 30% or thereabout is owned by insurance and pension funds. So you cannot now come and change the way we are designing our domestic borrowing without affecting the profits and the balance sheets of some of these people that were allowed to get into the commercial sector by the Degwa report of 1971. That is where our problem started. And if you look at now the history of the conflict of interest, started this year until now where we are today, where we had to get the help of the World Bank and others to push our parliament to pass the conflict of interest bill. which in our view was watered down at some point. It is not as strong as we would have wanted. And all those problems stem from the Degwa report of 1971, and we have discussed that in good detail. Now, looking at the rise of corruption in our country, I think I had alluded to the fact that in 2014, we had a PFM Act amendment that provided that now, before 2014, the PFM Act provided that any borrowing should hit the consolidated fund account before it goes elsewhere. But when it came to the Eurobond of 2014, an amendment was passed through Parliament very fast that amended that particular provision. This allowed us to pick Eurobond, and this money is, I think, the first hit a bank in New York before the money came back this way. And all of you will recall the issues that we got with the Eurobond, because right now we cannot put our fingers onto what the 2014 Eurobond did. And even the successive Eurobonds, we have challenges pinpointing which specific project did that particular Eurobond actually support. So, in our view, this is a particular registration that led to what we are calling fake contracts, fake debt contracts, in our view, because any debt contract should clearly indicate where this money is going and how it is going to be spent, how it is going to be audited. And indeed, the Auditor General report confirms that from the time we had that amendment in 2014, we have had sustained illegal and unconstitutional borrowing practices, especially from the commercial lenders. This has given us challenges because we cannot pinpoint where this money went. And now, I think this week, we have just heard what has happened with the buyback. Because now it seems like now we are on a journey to kick the bucket down the road. When the payments come due, like what we saw happen in January of 2024, we go into the market and buy back at higher interest rates. I think like the 2014 Eurobond, we had taken it at a coupon of 6.875%, but we bought it back at an interest rate of 10.8 something percent, meaning the Kenyan taxpayer will pay more for the Eurobond of 2014, and we have done the same with the Eurobond that was to mature in 2028. By the way, from 2028, 2031, all the way to 2034, we have various Eurobonds that are maturing and will have very big tickets. By the way, by the time we come to 2028, it will be like 2024 all over again. And our members of parliament, you need to help us to curb some of these challenges the way we are looking at them. Now, all these problems stem from budget credibility. And as Oko Ochumi, we have been of the view that what we have is not an expenditure problem. It's not a revenue problem, sorry, but an expenditure one, where we are coming up with unrealistic revenue projections at the beginning of our budget cycle. And if you look at the submissions we made to Parliament on the budget policy statement this year, we tried to do a computation of where our actual nominal GDP is, and this is a question many of us have been asking. What is our actual nominal GDP? Because we found that our government picks the number they want to use on our nominal GDP depending on its use. If you're using it to give us the macroeconomic environment, you pick a lower nominal GDP. If you're using it to compute our fiscal deficit, you pick a higher nominal GDP. Because it is a denominator. So if it's higher, it means your fiscal deficit looks small. While in actual sense, it is actually very big. Then we have this animal, and Honorable Caleb did mention about this. The misuse of Article 223 of our Constitution. The drafters of our Constitution foresaw a situation where you could find yourself in a situation where an emergency has arisen, and you need to spend money that has not been appropriated. And therefore, they inserted a provision at Article 223 of the Constitution where the Cabinet Secretary could approve expenditures awaiting parliamentary approval. But what we are seeing now is a misuse of this particular article, where the Cabinet Secretary for the Treasury can approve monies for anything right now, whether it is an emergency or otherwise. So what we have also seen, we have instances where this article has been used to approve expenditures that have ended up not being approved by Parliament. We have a case of, I think, 4 billion shillings that was to do with some subsidy on maize as we approach the elections of 2022, and I think a buyback of Telcom of about 6 billion. These two transactions amounting to around 10.2 billion were not approved by Parliament. And right now, there still remain audit queries in those state departments. But our challenge is, this particular article is a one-way street, where when the Cabinet Secretary approves those expenditures, Parliament has no choice. It's like their hands are tied. They cannot do anything. But the challenge we have with this, and the Auditor General did conduct a special audit on the use of Article 223, and this was commissioned, by the way, by Parliament. And the Auditor General provided recommendations on what is supposed to be done with Article 223. One of the recommendations is that we should have a guideline or some regulations that indicate at what point do you approve expenditures under Article 223. Because right now, those ones don't exist. That was the findings of the Auditor General. But up to now, we have not seen the executive willing. County governments are learning from the national government, and supplementary budgets have become one of the tools that county governments are now using to balance off their overly optimistic revenues at the beginning of the budget cycle. The challenge we have with Article 223 and supplementary budgets at large, we spent about 10 months of our budget cycle preparing the budget. There's a lot of consultations, a lot of public participation within the 10 months. But when it comes to supplementary budgets, they are prepared in a hurry by our treasuries, either the county or the national treasury, and we are not consulted as Kenyans at all, meaning the government can just revise everything that we did public participation on and do what they want. Worse off is Article 223, where the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury has a free check of 10% of our budget that he can reallocate at will, and there are no checks and balances for that, which is something that needs to change, and I think this has been raised by IMF and other bodies as well. Now, the whole animal of public debt. Recall the story I've given you of what happened in 1971. Now, we have a situation where we are now borrowing to fund balance sheets of some people. And some of these people are also associated, or they are politically exposed. And what we have seen over time, every new regime that comes in, they have to find a way of either being connected with a certain banking institution, or even some of our leaders owning certain banks. This helps them in terms of driving the whole issue of domestic borrowing. So we will not have a sober domestic borrowing plan until we make sure that the politically exposed persons are not running our financial sector. Those are the challenges that we are having when it comes to public debt. But right now, the other challenge we have, our debt repayment has overtaken every other social spending because it is a fast charge within our government. And from where we sit, we are seeing this is taking more people into poverty as we enrich a few elite in our society. If you go back to 2013, between 2013 and now, we have revised our debt ceilings several times. The first PFM Act provided for a debt anchor of 55% of our GDP, which is a global good practice. But when we got too close, or I would actually say we went beyond the 55% of our GDP, we thought, let us be wise enough, let's go to Parliament and ask them to give us a nominal ceiling. So they gave us an absolute ceiling, which we actually approached And I would say probably we passed it. So we went back and told them, bring it from 8 trillion, take it to 10 trillion, hoping that that would help us manage our debt. But then again, we approached the 10 trillion. Now, as I said, we are now at 11.8 trillion. So we thought, let us go back to a debt anchor. And right now, we are operating within a debt anchor of that 55% of GDP. But our current debt stock right now is at 68.3% of our GDP. Meaning, we are already operating illegally as a country, because we cannot have a PFM Act that tells us that we should operate within 55% of our GDP, and every other year, our parliament is approving budgets, as Dennis had said, with a deficit that is a trillion plus. That is where this game of playing with the nominal GDP comes about, because we want to show that we are not doing very badly, but we are doing very, very badly, and that is a situation that will take us nowhere. But we believe that we can still change some of these things, but we have to look at the whole issue of who owns our debt, and the whole issue of beneficial ownership. We need to know exactly who owns our debt in these banks, who are the shareholders, because the web that we have found out, we have seen that you have banks that have shareholding in insurance companies, and the reverse. We have insurance companies that have shareholding in banks. So all these guys are together, and they are the ones that are ripping us off. Our taxes, we pay our taxes not to pay back for development that we got, but we pay taxes for money to go back and enrich a few in our financial system. There is the whole issue of pending bills. Pending bills have now become a crisis, both in the national and county government. And in our view, these are not used for just temporary cash flow issues, but now they have become a structural problem. Especially in our counties, you'll find that after the lapse of a regime, the next regime that comes, they are not willing to repay the debts that were acquired before. And we are seeing this as a deep-seated problem within our procurement planning, our commitment control, and our cash flow forecasting, where, as I said earlier, when we have budgets that are not credible, it means that we will force our ministries, departments, and agencies to acquire services and goods against money they will never get. That is going to create the problems that we are having. And though the National Treasury has tried to advise through Treasury circulars that pending bills should be a fast charge, we are seeing an outright flouting of these regulations. And we hope that Parliament can pick these up and also try to help IMDAs to enforce this. What is even more worrying is the fact that these pending bills are not accounted for as official public debt. The 11.81 trillion that I've mentioned, that is our debt stock, we have a whole 700 plus billion as pending bills in our national government alone. In county governments, it could be another 300 or so billion that is not accounted for as debt stock, which is now killing our MSMEs, because you have people who have supplied services and goods, but they are not being paid. That is no wonder we are seeing our people getting out of jobs. I'll briefly look at some national government funds that are there. Some of them have been dormant. They are holding monies, but we're not seeing what they are doing. And I recall sometimes back, Parliament had instructed the Ministry Department and agencies to stop coming up with funds in the bills they are proposing. But we are seeing more and more funds being created, and these are conduits for corruption. For instance, we have what we call the government clearing agency, dark corruption in it, because we do. Briefly, I want to touch on tax analysis. Our tax system is now being used to enrich a few. We have a situation where our tax system is used to squeeze the last coin out of the ordinary Kenyan who has no choice. But when we have the bigger guys, when they are doing mergers and things of that nature, we see tax waivers happening. And we have seen a situation where our tax expenditure has even been higher than the monies we are taking to the county government. And of course, we have the new levies that are coming in, the affordable housing levy. We have the issues of SHA and so on that are still pushing us down the line. What is more shocking and what I want to highlight here is the fact that some of these funds that are collected through taxation, we are seeing them again being utilized to buy treasury bonds. For instance, the 46 billion that was from the affordable housing levy that has been used to buy treasury bills. We wonder why take money from us and then go ahead and lend the same money back to us. That is armed robbery, in my view. And we should check that, Mheshimiwa. Now, state-owned enterprises. Sessional paper number 10 of 1965. Again, it brought about the issue of domesticating some of the enterprises that we had. And due to the fact that our private sector was not as developed, government came up with an idea of getting involved in commercial enterprises. And then we had the issues of government having companies in logistics, in financial sector, and in hospitality. But right now, our SOEs are being used as conduits of grand corruption. If you look at the heavy scandals that we have in our country, they will be in our SOEs. You have your KEMSA, you have your Arol Kimwarera, the Kerio Valley Development Authority, and others. Even the fertilizer scandal at the NCPB and others. The major challenge we have with our state-owned enterprises, they are used for political patronage, where every other new government that comes in, the first thing they do, they change the boards of management of all our parastatals. This is used to bring in chairpersons who are aligned to the government or who could even be political failures. These entities that are supposed to give us dividends end up being conduits of corruption. We have a small problem with our payroll-related weaknesses, and here we have seen the SRC actually tell us that our public servants have over 247 allowances. That for some of us, we have never even experienced some of these things. And SRC has even proposed a reduction of these allowances. There are allowances called the sitting allowance. Mheshimiwa could be familiar with this. We have others called the responsibility allowances. All of us have responsibilities, but we don't get a responsibility allowance, acting allowance, and so on. There are so many allowances, and some of them are paid, not on the payroll. So we have our wage bill at around 48% of our revenue, while the PFM Act provides that our wage bill should not be more than 35%. These are issues that need to be checked. Procurement, a heavy area where we have corruption, and now what we are seeing is the introduction of the e-procurement system that is facing challenges. And in our view, this was supposed to save us around 85 to 90 billion shillings. But the resistance we are seeing coming from this keeps us worried. And I know the World Bank has been trying to push our government to adopt the e-procurement. And we can see the challenges that we are having in procurement, and we can mention many, many examples, and we've provided some examples like what we had at the Kenya Power and many others that are provided for in the report. Executive impunity, this is where now we have the issues of privatization, where now we have the executive which has more power to do some of these things, and Parliament has become it's like they are tied. They can't do much. The executive is influencing almost everything, and we've seen even coming up with some multi-agency task forces that the courts have pronounced themselves on this particular area. We have now the big issue of anti-money laundering and illicit financial flows. Even though we have tried to amend our laws to align with the FATF requirements, we are still grey-listed as a country where illicit financial flows flow through our country. And we're also seeing we have some enablers in this particular area. We have some law firms, some real estate companies that are helping illicit financial flows come through our country through those particular sectors. That is why right now we are actually in the grey list, and the EU has already pronounced itself on the fact that yes, we have a good law, but the way it is being implemented is still a challenge. Finally, we have central bank governance. This one we have called it a revolving door, where we have people working either in the IMF or other places. They find their way into the treasury and then eventually to the central bank. Or they come from the executive and back to the central bank. This is like a revolving door where people who work, especially in positions of power in the central bank, you will find their history either in IMF or in the treasury and the reverse. And we are wondering why that is the case. Why is it that somebody who comes from the executive and is appointed by the president, some of them have scandals behind them, but they are working in central bank? Then that is why we are having some of the challenges that we are having, and we might even conclude they are there for a particular purpose. Financial market regulations. Here we have seen the situations where some of our leading companies are being used by those in power to control some of our sectors. The steel industry is one case, the clinker issue, where we have a particular company that is controlling the entire clinker that is coming into our country, therefore controlling the entire cement industry in our country. Those are the challenges that we are having, and we've also seen the challenges that we are having with some of our banks that have even led to firing of huge numbers of people. Having said that, I want to stop at this point and welcome my colleague, Diana Gishege, to take us through some of the recommendations that we are making.
Makofi kwa Diana kabisa. And makofi to my good friend Alex. Clearly there's a lot to be said and clearly there's a lot to be shared, but Diana, just briefly.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Alex, for taking us through that. Allow me to borrow the protocols by Janet and say, good morning, taxpayers. Good morning, walipa ushuru. Honorable Karoli, I hope tuko pamoja kama walipa ushuru. It's the protocol of Okoa Uchumi because it's what rallies us together. The tax we pay, which is our social contract, and the thing that ought to remind us. All those guzzlers, when was the mafia scandal? 2018? 2016. I don't drive big cars. I have only managed to afford small cars. And I was driving a very small car on Ngong Road. And it was during the mafia scandal. And the government guzzlers came. Na Subaru ikakuja, 2 Land Cruisers na gari ingine nyuma wakaniskuma. Nikakataa kusonga. Gari yangu ilikuwa mzuri, ni chuma tu. Kadogo sana, very small car. And they knocked on my window, and I honorably rolled down my window. And they were like, Madam, toka tuko na haraka. I think my response shocked them because all I had in my mind was the mafia scandal. And I told them, yani siku hizi wezi wanatusukuma kwa barabara. Akiwezi wanatusukuma kwa barabara badala ya tuwachome. By the way, they just stopped and they went back. They had no answer. What do you mean? No, they asked me one question. What do you mean wezi? Si nyinyi serikali ndio mko na scandals. Wezi. They went back in line. That was 2016. And I only say this to tell the story of Okoa Uchumi. Okoa Uchumi, we've not started today. It is a story that began mainly, and when we are running the program, all the people you see, they have played a part in Okoa Uchumi. In 2019, when we realized that we were on a precarious path of a debt trap and economic wastage. That wastage has gotten us here today. And before I go to the recommendation, I just want to state that over the years, Okoa Uchumi has engaged both the executive, parliament, and even the judiciary. Members of Okoa Uchumi are in court over very many things around the economy, from CDF to division of revenue, to the sale of KICC, to construction of State House. All those and many more, we are in court every day. We also engage Parliament to stop a number of things. Interestingly, we are not afraid of politics. As such, Okoa Uchumi did engage the President, Ruto. Caleb has said he's not gone to State House. I have not either. And I am sure I have no plans to, and I would not be invited. But we did engage the presidential candidates in 2022. If anything, we take pride that Kenya Kwanza listened to us and made very serious commitments around what they would do with the economy. When we hit them hard, we only hit them because we informed them adequately. We have walked a journey with the World Bank and with the IMF. And just to state that currently, as a result of everybody, including our youth, realizing that there are no jobs because our money is being stolen, there are no services because our money is being stolen, this realization has gone all the way to the global front, and this year we are writing this particular report at a time when international institutions, including the IMF and the World Bank, are conducting their own reviews and diagnostics of the Kenyan government. However, we note the World Bank review and the IMF diagnostic can never tell the Kenyan story, can never fix the Kenyan problem. Sawa sawa? Haya, nikisema Okoa Uchumi mnasema nini? Wapi receipts? Okoa Uchumi? Okoa Uchumi? Why? Because the problem with our economy is purely an expenditure problem. So please let us ask for those receipts. So this particular report, we write it as a way of patriotic resistance. What? Patriotic resistance. It is an act of resistance that nobody can write our story. That if Parliament, and Honorable Karoli, you will take this message, when Parliament decides to betray the Kenyan people, we have no choice. We have no choice than to take back the power we have in Article 1 and Article 3 to defend the Constitution. And therefore the people's audit is an act to defend the Constitution as clearly written in Article 3 of the Constitution. Now, the problem is when you purport to take such a big mandate, and I understand why Parliament struggles with public participation, is that this report is far from over. Because we tried so much to tell the Kenyan story, up to yesterday we were still getting input into the report. So this is what we are calling the interim finding, and we hope it will inform the ongoing process with the IMF, with the World Bank, but ultimately with our institution. I want to take us to the recommendations that we are proposing to take forward. If you note, I am seated in a very good table with my friend Dr. Geshana from the Katiba Institute, and he told me when I said I'm seated with independent offices of the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget. That is the table I am seated at, very, very deliberately. But I am seated there because Constitution. So the recommendations we make are in that particular regard. I begin off with the CDF, where we are calling for a respect of separation of powers. And people may wonder, Alex did hint why we are recommending that NGCDF be wound up and all legislative funds. CDF started off as a good thing that was about devolving resources to the people. But CDF is a big problem to public finance management because every year, CDF is allocated 2.5 of the budget. It must increase every year. Yet the only people who can ensure that we have no fiscal deficit are our members of parliament. Do they have an incentive to reduce the budget? Do they have an incentive to reduce the budget? I know this is unpopular, but Kenyans, we must wind up CDF. As we wind up CDF, we must also take a step to allow our members of parliament not to be the mediums of development, not to be the people who give us charity. Let us go to members of parliament offices to tell them we do not have capitation for schools. We do not have roads. Let us not go to members of parliament to bury our dead, to help us with maternity bill. And that way we can wind up CDF. Nipeni makofi ndio niendele. We are seeking that we do conduct a forensic and performance debt audit. At the height of the Gen Z, there was an attempt by the president to constitute a task force to audit our debt. Our own Dr. Rugo had been taken there as a joint secretary. He never accepted the offer. He's up to the task, but all audits must remain firmly in the office of the Auditor General. Okay? So we want, that is one of the suggestions that we are making. We are also proposing that we need to create a mechanism for Parliament to, throughout and at all instances, be able to directly. Unajua, we are told that Parliament approves debt when they approve a deficit. Okay? So, whenever you see the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury read a budget and say, we have a small deficit, okay, of 700 billion. And it is a small one because we have already resourced the rest. That is what is used to say we have approved borrowing for that particular deficit. But it is problematic because we never really know how they will go and borrow. What has happened with this government, and Dennis told us this in the morning, they ensure that they borrow by all means. They borrow by all means. Are you in SACCOs? Muko kwa SACCO wa Kenya? So you even shop for the SACCO with the lowest interest. Our government takes even the most expensive credit. We have borrowed at 17, 18%. Our average 15, now it has gone down. Most countries globally do not borrow at more than 4% interest. So by the time we are at 16, we are 4 times, 400% higher than other nations that we want to borrow from. And because in our system of government, Parliament is the main oversight institution, they are the ones who hold the budget. If anything, we hold that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury has no business taking a budget to Parliament because the budget belongs to Parliament. In that sense, we are proposing that Parliament be able to make quarterly debt review and approval, because we are in a very, very tight spot. And borrowing from our friends in Sri Lanka, we are suggesting that we speak to our private sector, the bond underwriters, and we create something called a governance-linked bond. This is a bond where our banks float money, government security, at a lower interest, where the government commits to transparency and accountability. We do not wait for the IMF and the World Bank to come and sanction us. That's part of the recommendation. We move on to other recommendations that we are looking at. This one I have already alluded to. It is the fact that if we respect entirely the controller of budget, the auditor general to do their work, we will be able to deliver the needed fiscal discipline that we require in this country. We are saying, please completely do away with supplementary budgets. Why? At the beginning of every year, we start with a deficit. After supplementary budget, that deficit grows by at least 20%. Mnajua deficit ni nini? Unajua, I just want to make sure the people of Kenya are understanding. We don't use very tough terms. Uzuri, I am not an economist. Deficit means the whole of money we do not have. Shimo ya pesa yenye hatuna. Mnaelewa? Ni kama kiraka. Every year we start with a patch. Every supplementary budget increases our patch, because it introduces expenditure. One, we did not approve. Two, for money we do not have. And that strictly, our parliament is diligent enough. Like today, our members of parliament have told me that most of them are not able to be here because they have parliamentary committee. I think every quarter they can sit as they approve the debt. We should do away with a supplementary budget. Now, and the church is well represented here by the chair of NCCK. We did launch, well, it was launched. We enacted the conflict of interest legislation. Paka tukaiombea. It is one piece of legislation that will be remembered because we even prayed over it. However, we know that the Conflict of Interest Act as enacted is far from what we need to resolve the historical problem from the Degwa paper to date. We need a conflict of interest where all persons of PEPs, politically exposed persons, are properly declared and their proxies. If anything, nowadays I like to argue that not a single sector in Kenya is operated by free market forces. Name one. We used to say boda boda and matatu. Not anymore. Mama Mboga. Maybe Mama Mboga is operated by free market forces. But is it? Is allocation of market stalls. Mama Mbogas are here. I know they are here. Is allocation of market stalls free market forces? Not a single sector. That tells you what we must do around conflict of interest. Now, public participation is part of our national values. It is there in the devolution chapter. It is there on the chapter on our legislature and public finance. But today, Honorable Karoli, and you are with the Attorney General, we do not have a public participation law. So every time we move to court, that is the other place you will find Okoa Uchumi members. We will defend public participation, meaningful public participation where our views are considered, where the views are incorporated and feedback is given and follow-ups and budgets are given. So that's one of the recommendations that we have. We want to target lawyers in the house. Lawyers in the house. Lawyers are part of the reason we have public debt. Accountants. Si hao peke yao, accountants as well. Surveyors. Engineers. I think nearly every profession is very, very much responsible, one, for public debt, but they also have a regulatory role in our fight against money laundering. So we want, one, that all professional bodies that are mandated to work on money laundering be skilled and equipped, and that law enforcement officials work with them to ensure that we curb money laundering. Sorry, it reads that the government must pursue aggressive debt, not debt repayment. It is debt repayment, debt payment renegotiations. You are aware that we have negotiated for for most of our euro bonds. They will be paid in the future. Gen Z Muko, comrades in the future, you're here. So we cannot pay the debt we owe right now. We are not able to pay. So tumejitetea ndio tuachie mulipe. Malipo inaanza 2029 moving forward. Okay? We have not only negotiated our euro bonds, we are currently renegotiating our China loans. So, between now and 2029, we may get some breathing space. But is that breathing space for more money to be thrown around by politicians, or for us to prepare? This is a recommendation for the youth. As you hear that we are renegotiating, unless you people ensure that space that we create once we renegotiate is used properly, the tax increment you will face from 2032, 2024 will be child play. 2024 will be child play. So we are saying, yes, we must renegotiate our debt. And we are also saying, through the Office of the Auditor General, we need to be told the debt that we should not pay. We must be told the debt that we must not pay. Any debt that has no receipts, should we pay? Kama haina receipt, we are not paying.
Wapi receipts?
Secondly, any debt that was procured outside our legal framework, you cut corners on your own, we are not going to pay as well. But in the meantime, we will need to negotiate. We are supposed to roll out something called zero-based budgeting. And we are saying, yes, we welcome zero-based budgeting. Those who've worked with Treasury, like Alex, know that budget huwa inachenjiwa tu. Unaongeza inflation, it doesn't matter. The vote heads that existed maybe in 1963 still exist to date. The government has committed that we will be given a blank Excel sheet so that for the first time we define what our budget priorities are. That is a welcome thing. And I urge all of us, when that moment comes, we take over the budgeting process and ensure that we begin with national interest and then debt repayment and other things, and ensure that we curb the culture of wastage. Maybe this is our strongest opportunity to do away with, you've had there how many allowances? 247. Zimebakisha tu kidogo zifikie 290 constituencies. The number of allowances. Maybe we need to have more disallowances. I think the full disclosure on public debt, all aspects of public reporting on public debt ought to be provided. Na tusipewe two figures. You know, right now there is data on the Treasury website on debt, but it does not tell you the terms and conditions. I wish to also let you know that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasuries, I don't know whether that is why he did not come, is in contempt. Is in contempt. And I'm hoping as we work on the communique, one of the things we will do is when we serve him with contempt papers for not honoring a court decision made in December last year requiring that all our debt, how it was acquired, how it was utilized, how it will be repaid, must be known to we the sovereign tax payers. So wana ushuru tafadhali, tuko kazi. I am close to the end. This one I don't understand very much, and I know Sheila will help me, but it is around illicit financial flows, political capture, and ensuring that beneficial ownership register is made public or adequately facilitated so that we do not use confidentiality and secrecy to be the conduit for criminals to continue stealing from us. Now, there's something called the public-private partnership. Most Kenyans interacted with it when we had the Adani deal. But there was a law that was passed very, very recently in 2023, the Public-Private Partnership Act. I want us to remember that we do have a treasury, but under the current constitution, kibeti ya Kenya is with Parliament. Okay? The carrier of the public purse is Parliament. Therefore, if you are to commit the public purse, Parliament must be involved. Unfortunately, the Public-Private Partnership Act took away the power we have given to Parliament and ensured that it only rested in the executive. That becomes very, very problematic because based on where we are, part of how we get to a path of economic recovery is public-private partnership. So we are calling for the reform of that particular law so that there is improved transparency and accountability. Finally, I come to state-owned enterprises. And right now, Parliament has just approved the privatization of Kenya Pipeline Corporation. For those who study the markets, the capital markets, I am told this will be a blue chip company once it goes to the market. So kama uko na pesa, hauko kama Wakenya wengine wako Fuliza, this would be a company to invest in. I will not ask why it did not manage to be as profitable. It was not an entirely a loss-making institution. It wasn't. But people are saying it will become a proper blue chip company in the long run. Who are these? Is there a likelihood that somebody ran down Kenya Pipeline Corporation with a few things that happened recently, ndio yuzwe wanunue wakuwe wadosi, wakuje watupea 200 ya campaign? How do we safeguard against that? It is ensuring that we enact the Privatization Act bill that is currently in Parliament to ensure that there are certain safeguards even as we privatize our currently state-owned enterprises. And finally, on procurement and other economic crimes, I think it is time they should no longer be negotiable. All procurement and economic crimes, both in the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act and the Economic and Anti-Corruption Crimes Act, we shouldn't negotiate. At all levels, people need to be arrested, and anybody who holds political authority over an organ that is wasting or where there are acts of corruption needs to resign, so that we finally breathe life to Chapter 6 of our Constitution. Let me jump to, this is on SRC. I think it goes without saying that they have said we need to abolish so far 6 allowances. So tutabaki na 240. Sindio? Are we okay with the 240? So there ought to be a comprehensive review of all allowances currently payable to our public service officials, so that we ensure that we are getting the due service delivery and responding to the fact that we have a very tight fiscal space. I think it is time we must freeze completely creation of new state departments. Completely. And I know the World Bank is here. As you bring us the projects to skill our youth and so on, I hope they will remain anchored in the existing institution. Kama ujui state-owned enterprises, this is what has happened recently. After the broad-based government, how many were created? For the first time, the Office of the Attorney General has a Solicitor General and a Principal Secretary. Wapi receipt? Wapi order? You understand? When you increase a state department or create a government office, which is something we need to think about. Usually, if you're the head of a government, I think they occupy a floor. So you must be given a floor to occupy. You must be given people to supervise so that you feel like you merit to hold the office that you hold. So I think one of the things that we must take very strongly to Parliament and to the executive is that particular freeze, and then stop treating the Salary and Remuneration Commission work as advisory. It is not advisory. As part of separation of power and what we will for ourselves in the Constitution, they ought to guide the remuneration and benefit structure moving forward. Let me go to the second last slide. There are lots of recommendations and so on. This is around pending bills, where we are calling for all pending bills to continuously be reviewed and fully paid up. And we are saying start with the lowest volumes. Start with people with the lowest volumes. This is such a major problem because most of the Kenyans, they tried to trade with government, they took loans under and as a result, we are crippling our economy. When we say we have not defaulted on our debt, we have defaulted because the suppliers who are owed pending bills. Hiyo si deni. Ama deni ni when ni shirika kubwa, when ni jina ya Mkenya ama kampuni ya Mkenya. So we are already in default, and we are also calling for the amendment to the PFMA Act so that we do Public Finance Management Act to turn around the amendments that were proposed where money can go to a foreign account, that all our money must first come to the central bank, and therefore it becomes necessary that that money must be authorized by the Auditor General. Under this, we are also calling for the review of all funds that exist, and anywhere where there is duplicity, we do away with that through an independent review, and disbursement should only be done to fully constituted and legal boards moving forward. And we need a public dashboard. We need a public dashboard. Kila state department, you know, our money must start paying us. Balance sheet ikipungua, tukienda kwa website yao, tunaona. And as they create the dashboard, it cannot be procured from outside. Our youth are skilled enough in ICT skills to give us everything we need for the needed accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the highlights of our recommendations. And based on that, our topic, this is what we have, we think we have done in this country. There are a number of countries, and particularly Nigeria, Ghana, Malawi, Zambia, who have gone through the pain that we have gone through. And based on all this, one of the things we realize is our biggest problem is the people we elect into power. Unfortunately, the Auditor General cannot say that the problem is the people we elect to power because they audit resources. But what we have tried to do is what we are calling Office of the Citizen. How many people would like to belong to the Office of the Citizen? Office of the Citizen. No, not everybody wants to. Who does not belong to Office of the Citizen? Oh, okay. Now I have been threatened. All of us must belong to the Office of the Citizen. And as the Office of the Citizen, this report, which these are the advanced finding, is titled The People's... No, it is not a diagnostic. It is the People's Audit of economic miss. We have so many misses of governance. Fellow Kenyans, the lights are on. Your dashboard, no light is properly functioning. The report is just the beginning. It's a problem of governance that has resulted in a freeze of all our institutions, and it is what we will be discussing from now, 2027. For those who are okay with loans being paid 2032, sawa sawa. And as I close on economic misgovernance, if you do not have a voter's card, stop paying tax. I thank you.